Hi, I'm David Murphy. I'm here at Mobile World Congress with Marco Veremis, President of Upstream. Marco, hi.
Hi.
So, Marco, you put some research out a few days ago, and there was a stat in there that staggered me all about messaging and the number of messages that people are being exposed to in an advertising sense. I think the figure was something like 30 messages per person in 1996 and something like 735 this year. When you saw the results of that research, there's tons more stats in there. Were you surprised at the numbers?
We were not surprised at the numbers. They have grown from essentially 170 billion ad impressions in 96 to more than 5 trillion today. That's a massive inflation. What was more interesting for us was to check what kind of impact that has had on response rates, engagement rates, and purchase rates from consumers. And I think the most worrying part of the research has to do with the fact that it was 7% response rates in 96, and now average response rates are less than 0.1%. So there's clearly something wrong there. Now, this research we did with YouGov in the US and the UK dwells deeper into how consumers are likely to react to this advertising overload. And some pretty interesting things come through. There is no doubt that people feel they're receiving far too much advertising. 66% said that is way, way excessive. Now, I guess a few years ago, that might have led to consumer indifference at worst. These days, it seems to lead to a far more proactive, negative reaction. And actually, more than 11% of people said that I would go on social media and badmouth that brand, a brand that was over contacting me. Essentially, 27% said that I would stop using their product or service, and 66% said that I would unsubscribe from their advertising. So clearly there's an issue there.
Now, I'm not surprised in people's responses to that sort of advertising overkill. I must admit I was a little surprised that it exists, because everything I hear from companies, it's all about targeting and one-to-one marketing and actually, forget carpet bombing and broadcasting, make it more personal. Is that not what's happening in your experience?
Most companies are interested in this approach. Fewer companies are actually practicing this approach. But even those who are really encounter another issue, which is to do with the feeling consumers have that their privacy is being invaded. So if you look at the targeting criteria most companies use, they have certainly very private data involved. So essentially, it's either demographic data or life stage data. Consumers these days seem to have a very low tolerance of being marketed to through usage of such data. It's interesting that when you ask them what are the kinds of data or the kinds of hooks marketeers should be using, they very rarely mention anything that is personal. I mean, in the research we did, essentially 26% said that I'd like to be targeted according to my hobbies and interests. And hobbies or interests, as you well know, are very, very public.
Yes.
There's nothing private about it.
No.
People will brag about their favorite sport or their favorite team. The other thing they said was context, assuming I've given my permission. It could be location, it could be timing, time of day, or it could be the website I'm surfing. But context is another trigger that they're comfortable with. And 7% actually said that the content of the message is highly important, and it has nothing to do with personal data. So I guess the interesting thing here is, on the one hand, you've got the danger of over-contacting, and I think a lot of brands have suffered huge dropout rates as a result of that. But on the other hand, if you get too targeted and you're using the kinds of data that most companies are using these days, you face the other issue, which is the perception that you're invading their privacy. And only recently there was a major scandal in the US about underage girls being marketed to with the assumption that they're pregnant and their families not knowing about it. Now, whether you're in a relationship or out of a relationship, whether you just had a child, whether you are essentially out of a job, these are very, very dangerous data points. And I guess for us, the holy grail of targeted marketing in the next 5 years would most likely be about targeting using criteria that are not invasive. So that's really our focus from a technology point of view and from a methodology point of view.
And does your technology enable you to achieve that today?
Our technology increases purchase rates on average by 120%, so it works. But it works without essentially using any personal data.
So it's all about the context, the interests, the hobbies.
Exactly. It is very much about context. It is very much about the experience. For example, adding gaming elements into your communication. It is very much about the content of the message itself. Now, these are all, I think, domains or areas or hooks that are very, very interesting in the sense that they bring results, but they don't cause any offense. That's what we're focused on.
Marco, as ever, fascinating to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, David.